Don't come back here until you apologize to Cooper. Those were the first words my son said to me after 29 years of raising him, feeding him, and saving him from every foolish thing he ever did. And the worst part? He wasn't joking. He stood in the doorway of that spotless white house like a bouncer guarding a secret club. Behind him, his wife Madison crossed her arms, her manicure catching the porch light like polished claws. Between them, their golden retriever sat smugly on the welcome mat, head tilted, tongue out, like he knew he'd just been crowned king of the family. I'd come to drop off a casserole. That's it. Chicken and rice, his favorite since he was 5. Madison had called earlier in the week, mentioning they'd been so busy lately, and didn't have time to cook much. So I spent my Thursday morning chopping onions, humming to the radio, and wrapping the dish in foil. I even tied a little red ribbon around it, something my late husband, David, used to do when we brought food to neighbors. Love is in the details, he'd say. But apparently, love doesn't mean much when you offend the dog. You're serious? I asked. My voice cracked, though I tried to sound calm. Mom, Tyler said, shifting the casserole from one hand to the other, Cooper's still upset from last weekend. You scared him. I blinked. I scared him? He jumped on me. I told him off. That's it. Madison's lips tightened. You yelled. He's sensitive. And you shoved him away. I was trying not to spill my coffee, I said. He scratched my arm. Madison tilted her head. Maybe if you hadn't raised your voice, he wouldn't have reacted. Dogs sense bad energy. Bad energy. That's what she called 70 years of working, surviving, and trying to keep my family together. I looked at my son. Tyler, you're really standing there telling me I can't come into your house, my grandson's house, because your dog's feelings are hurt? He looked away, jaw tightening. It's not just that. Madison thinks you've been judgmental lately. Judgmental. I repeated, my throat tight. He shrugged. You made a few comments about how we raise Cooper. About spending money on his birthday party. Oh, forgive me, I said, for thinking a custom cake and a dog psychic might be too much for a golden retriever. That's when Madison gasped, as if I'd cursed in church. See? That tone right there. You always make us feel small. You're toxic. Toxic. My son's wife called me toxic. Tyler sighed. Mom, I think it's best if we take a break. Cooper's energy hasn't been the same since that day. You can come back when you're ready to apologize. The door closed before I could answer. For a moment, I just stood there, casserole cooling in my hands, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the crickets. Through the frosted glass, I could still see Cooper's shadow wagging its tail. That night, I put the untouched casserole in the fridge and sat at the kitchen table until dawn. I kept replaying the scene, trying to understand how my son, my only child, had turned into a man who valued a dog's emotions over his own mother's. But then again, maybe this wasn't new. Maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. Tyler was born during one of the hardest winters of my life. David and I were living in a one-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. The ceiling leaked, the radiators hissed, and our hands smelled like detergent. I worked double shifts at the diner while David took construction jobs, and when we couldn't afford daycare, I strapped Tyler to my back while I served tables. He grew up on the rhythm of coffee cups clinking and orders shouted across the kitchen. When David died of a stroke in 2008, Tyler was 22, fresh out of college, ambitious, full of dreams about real estate and startups. I sold our house to help him buy his first investment property. He promised I'd always have a place in his home. He said, Mom, one day you'll never have to worry about money again. Now, 15 years later, I stood outside that same home, exiled by a woman half my age and a dog named Cooper. The humiliation burned deeper than anger. It wasn't about the dog, it was about control. Madison had been tightening her grip for years, deciding where I sat at dinner, what I could bring as gifts, how long I could visit. She framed it as boundaries, but it always felt like punishment wrapped in politeness. I tried calling him the next day. Straight to voicemail. Then again. Nothing. A week passed. Then 2. Finally, a text came from Madison's number. Hi Carol. We think it's best if you don't contact us for a while. Cooper's still anxious when we mention your name. Please respect our space. I stared at that message until the words blurred. My name made their dog anxious. For the first time, I realized I'd raised a man who'd lost his backbone, and maybe his soul. Madison didn't just own the house. She owned him. On the third week of silence, I drove to the park near their home. I wasn't stalking them, I just wanted to see if they were okay. That's what mothers do, even when they're told not to. I parked across from the playground, half hidden by oak trees. And there they were. Tyler throwing a frisbee, Madison laughing, Cooper leaping through the air. My grandson, Mason, toddled near the swings, holding a juice pouch. My chest ached watching them. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined the cruelty. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Then I heard Madison's voice, carried by the wind. Good boy, Cooper. You're such a good boy. So much better than people who can't control their temper. Tyler laughed. Don't start. Madison smirked. I'm serious. Some folks just don't understand respect. She didn't even have to say my name. It hung there, unspoken but sharp. I drove home shaking. The kind of shaking that comes from heartbreak and fury sharing the same space. When I got home, the answering machine light was blinking. I pressed play. Mrs. Clark? This is Denise from First Summit Bank. We've been trying to reach you. It's about the joint investment account you set up with your son last year. There have been some changes in the ownership structure. Could you please call us back? I froze. Joint account. Ownership changes. I hadn't touched that account since Tyler convinced me to put my savings somewhere safe. It held what was left of my life insurance, David's pension, and the sale of our old house. I called immediately, voice trembling. This is Carol Clark. You said something about changes. The banker paused. Yes, Mrs. Clark. We received documentation 2 weeks ago authorizing the transfer of primary control to Mr. Tyler Clark. It was signed by both account holders. Both? I whispered. I didn't sign anything. A heavy silence followed. Ma'am, I have the paperwork right here. Signature matches our records. But if you believe there's been fraud, we can start a review. I hung up before she finished. My hand was shaking so badly the phone nearly slipped. It wasn't just the dog. It was money. Control. Ownership. Madison hadn't just banned me from their house, she'd cut off my access to everything I'd worked for. That night, I went into the attic and pulled out an old photo album. There was Tyler at 5, grinning with frosting on his face. At 10, holding a cheap plastic trophy. At 18, arms around me at graduation, saying, I'll make you proud, Mom. And now, at 37, standing beside a woman who turned him into a stranger. I sat there until sunrise, the sky bleeding pale pink through the window. My world had shrunk to a quiet house, an empty bank account, and a phone that never rang. But somewhere between grief and disbelief, something inside me shifted. A small, sharp voice whispered, they think they can erase you. They think you're weak. I closed the photo album and stood up. If they wanted me gone, I'd give them silence. But I wouldn't disappear. I was done waiting for apologies, from them or from their dog. Because something told me that what they'd stolen was bigger than money. And I was going to find out exactly how deep their betrayal went. The first real sign that they weren't just being petty, but calculated, came 3 days after that call from the bank. A letter arrived from Hanson and Boyd Legal Associates. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with embossed gold letters. The kind of stationery that announces itself before you even open it. Inside was a polite, professionally cruel paragraph. Dear Mrs. Clark. We represent Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Clark regarding shared financial and property matters. In light of recent family tension, our clients request that all communications regarding joint accounts or previous investments be directed through this office. Please refrain from personal contact until such matters are resolved. Warm regards. Hanson and Boyd Legal Associates. I read it 3 times. Refrain from personal contact. My own son had hired lawyers to tell me not to call him. When I finally sat down, the chair creaked like it was sighing for me. I could almost hear Madison's voice behind that letter, soft, patronizing, practiced. It's just easier this way, Carol. You always take things so personally. But the part that chilled me wasn't the tone, it was the timing. The letter was dated the day after my phone call to the bank. They'd known I'd find out. They were already covering their tracks. I took the letter to my neighbor Linda, a retired nurse who'd lived next door since the 80s and who still baked cookies for every holiday whether anyone asked or not. She squinted at the page through her glasses and let out a low whistle. "Lord, they've gone corporate," she muttered. I nodded, numb. "Can they do this? Take my money like that?" Linda frowned. "Not legally. Not unless you sign something." I didn't. "Then you need a lawyer. And a good one." I didn't have the heart to tell her I couldn't afford one yet. Not until I figured out exactly what they'd taken. That night, I sat with my old financial folder, yellowing papers, bank statements, David's pension documents. My late husband had always said, "Keep copies of everything. Paper never lies." I flipped through them, looking for anything that might help. And there, tucked between two statements, I found something odd, a notarized form dated 6 months ago. My name. Tyler's name. And a signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. The slant was right, but the flourish on the C in clock was missing. I never forgot that flourish. It was how I'd signed every check, every permission slip, every Christmas card since high school. They'd forged it. They'd actually forged my name. I sat back in disbelief, the page trembling in my hands. That's when I stopped crying. Because I understood something in that moment. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. It was a takeover. Over the next week, the betrayal grew teeth. First, the bank froze my account pending verification. Then, I received a call from a real estate agent asking if I was still planning to gift my property to my son. I never said that, I told her, my voice cracking. "Well," she said hesitantly, "your son mentioned you were moving into assisted living soon, and that he'd be handling the sale." "I'm not moving anywhere," I snapped. "And he's not handling anything." By the time I hung up, I was shaking so badly I had to hold onto the counter. They were trying to erase me. Paper by paper. Signature by signature. A few nights later, Linda came over with a thermos of chamomile tea. She'd called in a favor with her cousin, who worked part-time at the county clerk's office. "Carol," she said quietly, "your name's been taken off the title of that rental property you co-signed for Tyler last year. He filed a quitclaim deed." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," she hesitated, "you gave up your ownership rights." "I didn't give up anything." "I know, honey. But according to the records, you did." I pressed my palms against my knees, feeling the world tilt. My savings, my property, my dignity, slipping away one document at a time. For a few days, I went quiet. I didn't answer calls. Didn't open the blinds. I ate toast and stared at the wall. Grief does strange things. It moves in circles, shock, disbelief, anger, silence, then back again. But somewhere between one breath and the next, the silence turned into strategy. Because I realized, if Madison had the audacity to forge my name, she was arrogant enough to leave proof. And arrogance was something I could use. I started small. I went to the diner where Madison often brought her book club, which, according to Linda, was just a group of women who drank white wine and complained about their mothers-in-law. I sat in the corner booth, sipping weak coffee, pretending to read the paper. They didn't notice me. Madison never looked twice at anyone she didn't need something from. They talked about their new flooring, their dog supplements, and how poor Carol still doesn't get it. Then one of them laughed. "You really got your husband to sign for her account? Girl, you're dangerous." Madison smirked. "Please. I just typed up what she said and filled in the rest. She'll never fight it. She's too proud." "Isn't that illegal?" Madison rolled her eyes. "Only if she finds out." I nearly dropped my cup. I left before they could see my face, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Now I had something. A confession. But hearsay wasn't enough. I needed proof. That weekend, I visited an old friend, Martin Delgado, a retired police officer who'd helped David during his construction years when a contractor refused to pay. He was now a security consultant, which I hoped meant he still knew his way around an investigation. He listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded over a notebook. When I finished, he leaned back. "You're saying your daughter-in-law forged your signature and your son's complicit?" Yes. And you've got a recording? Not yet. But I can get one. He nodded slowly. Then do it. But be careful. Make her feel safe. Make her talk. How? He smiled. Simple. Let her think she's already won. So I called Madison. It was the first time I'd dialed her number since the banishment. Her voice came sharp and sweet. Carol, this is a surprise. I just wanted to apologize, I said softly. For everything. Especially to Cooper. I could almost hear her smile through the line. That's very mature of you. I'd like to bring over some treats for him. Maybe talk things out. Tyler doesn't have to be there. There was a pause. Then she said, all right. Tomorrow at 2. When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. My reflection on the screen looked older, harder. Tomorrow, I wasn't going there to apologize. I was going there to record the truth. At 1:59 p.m., I stood outside their pristine White House again. The same door that had once been my home away from home now looked like a set piece from a dream I couldn't re-enter. Madison opened it wearing a floral blouse and that smile she saved for social media. Carol, you look lovely. Come in. The golden retriever bounded toward me, tail wagging. Hi Cooper, I said calmly. I brought you something. I handed over a little bag of dog biscuits. She took it, beaming. See? He forgives you already. I smiled back, slipping my phone into my cardigan pocket, voice recorder already running. We sat in the kitchen. Marble counters. Fresh flowers. A candle that smelled like wealth and distance. I really am sorry about last time, I began. I know I overreacted. Madison waved it off. Don't worry about it. Honestly, it worked out fine. Oh. She sipped her tea. Well, since then, Tyler and I got all the finances streamlined. Clean slate, you know? You were always a bit too sentimental with money. I forced a chuckle. That's fair. And the bank, well, once we got your signature sorted, things were smooth. My signature? She blinked, realizing too late. Oh, I mean when you signed. I don't remember signing anything, I said lightly. She smiled thinly. You must have forgotten. Tyler handled it. We didn't want to bother you with paperwork. I tilted my head. You know, the bank mentioned the same thing. That the signature looked perfect. Madison froze for half a second. Then with a quick laugh, well, I'm good at paperwork. Guess I know you too well. My phone caught every word. When I left, the afternoon sun hit me square in the face. I walked to my car, locked the doors, and let out the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. Proof. I had it. But as I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and saw Madison standing in the window, phone pressed to her ear, eyes narrowed. She knew. My pulse spiked. I drove away fast, but not fast enough to ignore the sinking feeling that I'd just declared war. That night, I sent the audio file to Martin. He called back within minutes. You've got her, he said. But be smart. Don't confront them yet. Let me talk to a friend in financial crimes. We'll trace the signatures. If they used your ID for anything, we'll find it. Thank you, I whispered. Just promise me one thing, he said. Don't go near that house again. They're dangerous now, not physically, but legally. And people like that? They don't stop at stealing money. They steal peace. I promised. But peace wasn't what I wanted. I wanted truth. And I wanted them to watch it unfold with witnesses. The next morning, a letter arrived, this time from Family Services. Apparently, Madison had filed a complaint. She claimed I'd been harassing them, stalking their home, and endangering their emotional support animal. It was official now. They weren't just trying to silence me, they were trying to destroy my reputation. And in that moment I knew, forgiveness was no longer part of the story. This was going to court. And when it did, I'd make sure every last lie came to light. The morning after that letter from Family Services arrived, I sat at my kitchen table with the blinds half drawn and my heart pounding like a slow drum. On the counter, the envelope lay open beside a cup of untouched coffee. The accusation was clear: harassment, stalking, emotional endangerment. 3 words that could turn a grandmother into a criminal. Madison hadn't just crossed a line, she'd redrawn the map entirely. I wanted to cry, but something inside me had hardened beyond tears. Every insult, every silence, every door closed in my face had calcified into something sharp and deliberate. I wasn't going to be erased. So I did what any mother cornered by her own child's greed would do. I started planning. The first step was documentation. Martin came over that afternoon with a small recorder, a notepad, and a kind of steady patience only former detectives have. "We build the story piece by piece," he said. "Timeline, evidence, motive, opportunity. You keep every letter, every message, every memory." So we did. We spread everything across my dining table: the forged document, the bank letters, the lawyer notice, the recording of Madison's casual confession. Martin drew a line down the center of a yellow pad. On one side, their actions. On the other, my proof. Changed account ownership, forged signature form, Exhibit A. Quitclaim deed filed, county record copy. Verbal admission, audio file, time-stamped. Harassment claim, letter from family services. He looked at me and smiled faintly. "You've got more than you think." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like air in my lungs again. Step 2 was allies. I didn't have many, just Linda next door, a handful of church acquaintances, and the lingering respect of people who'd known me back when my husband was alive. So I started calling. Carefully. Quietly. "Hi Margaret, it's Carol. Do you still work part-time at the notary office?" "Yes, why?" "I need a favor. I think someone forged my signature." Or, "Hi Dennis, this is Carol Clark. You're still with the local paper, right? How do you go about verifying public property filings?" They didn't ask too many questions. Small towns have long memories, and people love a righteous story. Within days, I had a copy of the forged quitclaim deed, the date it was filed, and a note from Margaret verifying that she hadn't notarized it. The notary stamp? A fake. Martin smiled when I showed him. "She's sloppy," he said. "That's good. Sloppy people always leave fingerprints, metaphorical and real." Meanwhile, Madison doubled down. The family services investigator, a polite young man named Aaron, called to schedule a home visit. "Standard procedure," he said. "We just need to confirm both sides' accounts." When he arrived, I made him tea and showed him my stack of evidence. I didn't rant or beg, I simply told the truth. He listened, nodding slowly. When I played him the recording of Madison admitting to filling in my signature, his eyes widened. "I can't speak for the department," he said carefully, "but you might want to file your own complaint. What you're describing sounds criminal." "I already have someone working on it," I said. "I just needed you to hear it from me first." After he left, I watched him walk to his car, glance back once, and shake his head as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. For the first time, the shame began to shift, from me to them. By the end of that week, Martin's contact in financial crimes, Detective Alvarez, had taken an interest. "She's clever, your daughter-in-law," Alvarez told me over the phone. "But she's not a professional. She left digital traces. We can see the IP address used to submit those documents to the bank's portal. It's registered to your son's home Wi-Fi." I closed my eyes. "So it's him too." "Looks like it," he said. "We'll need to move carefully. If they catch wind of the investigation, they could hide or destroy evidence. Do you have access to any of their physical mail?" I almost laughed. "They banned me from their house." He chuckled. "Then we'll find another way." Another way came through Linda. Her granddaughter babysat for Madison sometimes, well used to. The girl, Sophie, had overheard a few things during her shifts and wasn't fond of Madison's temper. When Linda mentioned my situation, Sophie texted me privately. "Mrs. C, I think I saw your name on a folder in their office. Madison told Tyler not to shred it yet. Want me to check next time I'm there?" My hands shook as I typed back. "Only if it's safe. Don't take anything, just look." A week later, Sophie sent a photo. It was a stack of papers, partially visible through a half-open drawer, my name, my old signature, and something that looked like a new form, this one transferring insurance benefits. They weren't done stealing. They were expanding. Martin and Alvarez decided that was enough to justify a search warrant. But to get one, they needed a sworn statement and a clear chain of custody for the recording. That meant I had to walk into a police station and make it official. The morning I did, I dressed carefully. Dark blazer, neat hair, the kind of composure that says I am not your stereotype of a frail old woman. The officer at the desk took my report with quiet respect. When I played the audio of Madison's voice, another detective came over to listen. By the time it ended, both were taking notes. "Ma'am," one of them said, "this is strong evidence. We'll coordinate with the financial department. But be prepared, these cases take time." Time was fine. I'd already lost years to silence. In the meantime, I began my own trap, something personal. Madison lived for appearances. Her social media pages were immaculate: pastel aesthetics, inspirational quotes, pictures of Cooper wearing bandanas that matched her outfits. So I started posting too. Photos of my garden. My old family recipes. Subtle captions like, "Funny how truth always blooms after the frost. Signatures fade, but handwriting never lies." I knew she'd see them. And she did, because within days, I received a text from Tyler. "Mom, please stop posting those weird quotes. You're embarrassing yourself." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "I'll stop when you stop pretending you don't know what's coming." He didn't answer. Martin called 2 days later. "We've got movement," he said. "The DA's office wants to meet. They think there's enough for preliminary charges: fraud, forgery, identity theft." I sat down slowly. Against both of them? Yes. I exhaled. God help me. He hesitated. "You sure you want to go through with this? Once this starts, there's no turning back. They'll hate you." I laughed softly. "They already do." But before the law could move, Madison struck again, her final attempt to silence me. It came in the form of a letter hand-delivered by a courier. "Cease and desist. Dear Ms. Clark. You are hereby instructed to discontinue all defamatory statements regarding Mr. and Mrs. Clark, both verbally and through social media. Failure to comply will result in civil action. Sincerely, Hanson and Boyd Legal Associates." I read it 3 times, then slipped it into a folder labeled Evidence. When I showed it to Martin, he grinned. "Perfect. That's retaliation. It proves intent to intimidate a witness." Madison had turned her own arrogance into a weapon I could use. A few nights later, while sorting through old photos, I found one of Tyler at 10 years old, kneeling beside our old mutt Jasper, holding up a stick like a trophy. He'd written on the back in crooked pen, "Best dog ever. Mom said love means being kind even when you're mad." I stared at those words until the letters blurred. Somewhere between then and now, I'd lost my boy to someone else's ambition. I didn't know if I wanted revenge anymore. What I wanted was truth, to make him see what he'd become, even if it meant breaking him to do it. The day before the warrant was due to be served, Detective Alvarez called. "We're good to go tomorrow morning. You'll need to be present to identify your documents. You sure you're ready?" "Yes," I said. But that night, as I sat in the dark, phone in hand, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Tyler. His voice was tight, almost panicked. "Mom, what are you doing? I could ask you the same thing." Madison said the police called her. "Is it true?" "Yes." He groaned. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We were just trying to protect our assets." "By stealing mine?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it, Tyler?" Silence. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "She said you wanted to give it to us. That you were getting old, and you didn't want the hassle anymore." I felt my throat close. "And you believed her?" I don't know." I could hear Madison in the background shouting something, then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. Morning came heavy and gray. The squad cars parked discreetly near the curb, their lights off. I watched from a distance as the officers walked up to my son's door, papers in hand. Madison opened it, hair perfectly done, confusion rehearsed. But when they mentioned forgery, the color drained from her face. Inside, voices rose, doors slammed. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw enough: the gesture, the panic, the sudden collapse of her composure. When they carried out the files and laptops as evidence, I caught a glimpse of my photo, framed on a shelf. Me and Tyler at his graduation. The frame was cracked. That evening, Martin called. "They've confirmed the signatures were forged. The case will go to court." I said nothing for a long moment. Then, will they go to jail? Maybe. Or maybe they'll settle. Either way, they'll answer for it. I looked out the window at the fading sunset. The air smelled like rain and renewal. For the first time in months, the silence around me felt peaceful, not lonely. But as the sky darkened, I couldn't shake the image of my son's face at the door: fear, confusion, maybe even regret. This wasn't over. The truth was out, but the damage was deeper than money or law could fix. Tomorrow, the headlines would begin, the neighbors would whisper, and the courtroom would open its doors. And when it did, I'd be there, calm, ready, holding every piece of proof in my trembling but steady hands. Because the only thing stronger than betrayal is the courage to stand and name it in public. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, the kind of smell that carries the weight of other people's mistakes. I sat in the hallway outside room 203 with my palms folded in my lap, pretending I wasn't shaking. Across from me, Madison and Tyler whispered furiously with their lawyer. She wore a pale blue suit, pearls, and a look of effortless righteousness. Tyler kept rubbing the back of his neck, eyes darting anywhere but toward me. It had been 3 months since the warrant. 3 months since the officers had carried those boxes out of their home while Madison screamed about family betrayal. Now here we were, the moment every lie was about to meet daylight. The bailiff opened the door. Case 47C, Clark vs. Clark. My name. His name. Both attached to a word that once meant blood but now meant battlefield. The courtroom was small but packed. Neighbors, reporters, even a few people from church who'd come to show support. I could feel their eyes on me as I took my seat beside Martin and the assistant district attorney. When Madison walked past, she gave me that brittle smile people reserve for funerals and victory parties. "You look well, Carol," she murmured, her tone a mix of pity and poison. I met her eyes. "You won't by the end of the day." The judge, a stern woman with a silver streak through her bun, called the room to order. "We're here to determine the authenticity of financial documents and the validity of transfer signatures in the matter of Carol Clark versus Tyler Clark et al." Madison's lawyer, young, confident, the kind who thought charm could outtalk evidence, rose first. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than a family misunderstanding. Mrs. Clark Sr. has become confused about her own paperwork." "Objection," the prosecutor snapped. "That statement presumes mental incompetence with no evidence." "Sustained," said the judge. "Stick to facts, counsel." The lawyer adjusted his tie. "Very well. The defense asserts that the elder Mrs. Clark willingly transferred control of the joint investment account and property to her son and daughter-in-law. The paperwork was completed with her consent." I could feel my jaw tighten. "Willingly." The prosecutor stood. "We intend to prove otherwise, that the documents in question were forged using falsified notary information, submitted through an IP address registered to the defendant's residence, and accompanied by recorded admissions." The room went still. Martin squeezed my hand under the table. "Steady," he whispered. "The prosecutor called me first." My knees wobbled as I stood, but once I took the oath, something in me steadied. "Mrs. Clark," she began, "can you tell the court when you first discovered irregularities with your account?" I spoke clearly. 3 months ago. The bank informed me that control had been transferred without my knowledge. When I asked for proof, I saw a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. She handed me the document. "Is this the form?" "Yes." "Did you sign it?" "No, ma'am." "Did you authorize anyone else to sign on your behalf?" "No." She nodded. "And what did you do after discovering this?" "I called the bank, then received a letter from my son's attorneys instructing me not to contact them directly. That's when I realized it wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate." As I spoke, I avoided looking at Tyler. But I could feel him shifting, restless. The prosecutor continued. "Did you ever confront your daughter-in-law about the forgery?" "Yes." "And what did she say?" I took a breath. She said she'd just filled in what I'd said, and that I was too proud to fight it. I recorded that conversation. Your Honor, permission to play Exhibit C. The sound filled the room, Madison's voice, bright and dismissive. I just typed up what she said and filled in the rest. She'll never fight it. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Madison's lawyer jumped up. That's taken out of context. The judge raised a hand. You'll have your turn, counsel. Sit down. I looked at Madison. Her smile was gone now. Only the eyes remained, cold, calculating, cornered. Next came Detective Alvarez. He explained the digital trail, how the forms were uploaded from their home network, how the notary stamp was forged using a public image, how the bank records showed transfers matching Madison's personal spending. Luxury pet services, home renovations, jewelry, he read. Over $40,000 in transactions. Madison leaned toward her lawyer, whispering fiercely. Tyler stared at his hands. When the defense finally called him to the stand, I braced myself. He looked thinner, older somehow. The confident posture was gone. Tyler, his lawyer said softly, did you believe your mother wanted you to take over her finances? He hesitated. Madison told me she did. So you had no reason to suspect wrongdoing? I guess not. The lawyer smiled, sensing weakness. So you acted out of trust and care, not malice? Yes. The prosecutor stood. Mr. Clark, are you aware that the IP address used to submit those forged forms was yours? He swallowed. Madison handled the computer stuff. Did you ever ask her how she obtained your mother's signature? No, so you never verified anything before spending her money? His face reddened. She said it was ours. Ours. Family money, he muttered. The prosecutor stepped closer. And when your mother discovered the theft, did you tell her to apologize to your dog before she could come home? A murmur ran through the courtroom. Tyler looked at me for the first time, shame flooding his face. Yes. Why? Because Madison said Mom was being cruel to Cooper, and to us. Do you believe that now? He didn't answer. His shoulders sagged. When Madison took the stand, the atmosphere changed, like static before a storm. She smiled at the jury, poised, polished. I never meant harm, she began sweetly. Carol was struggling. We were helping her manage things she couldn't keep track of. She's old-fashioned. The prosecutor's tone turned surgical. Old-fashioned enough to need her name forged? That's not what happened. You said, and I quote, I just typed up what she said and filled in the rest. Madison's smile faltered. That was sarcasm. Then why did you forge a notary stamp? I didn't. And yet the fake stamp appears on every document you filed. Madison's eyes flashed. Look, it was Tyler's idea, she blurted. He said his mother wanted to transfer things. Tyler's head jerked up. That's a lie. The judge's gavel hit once. Order. But the damage was done. The perfect couple facade cracked like glass. The prosecutor leaned in. Mrs. Clark, you demanded your mother-in-law apologize to your dog before she could see her family again, correct? Madison blinked. That's irrelevant. Answer the question. Yes, she snapped. And you did this knowing you had already stolen her assets? Madison's lips tightened. It wasn't stealing. It was taking care of what she couldn't. Taking care of it by buying jewelry and spa treatments for a golden retriever? The gallery tittered before the judge silenced them. Madison glared at me, all charm gone. You always wanted to make me look like the villain, she hissed. You couldn't stand that Tyler finally had a woman who didn't worship you. I stayed calm. I didn't need worship. Just honesty. She slammed a hand on the stand. You ruined our family. The judge's voice cut like a blade. That's enough. When court adjourned for the day, reporters swarmed outside. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted, Mrs. Clark, how does it feel to face your son in court? I paused on the courthouse steps. It feels, I said, like finally waking up from a long, cruel dream. Tyler and Madison exited moments later, surrounded by their lawyer. The crowd turned on them, questions, murmurs, the clicking of lenses. Madison's composure cracked under the flashbulbs. Tyler walked ahead, face pale. For a moment, our eyes met. Not anger. Not even hate. Just recognition of everything we'd lost. That evening, Martin and I reviewed the day's transcript. "They're finished," he said quietly. Madison perjured herself. Tyler contradicted her twice. The jury won't miss that. I nodded, but victory felt hollow. He's still my son. Martin sighed. Sometimes justice and love don't fit in the same room. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. The next day, the defense tried to regain ground, but the prosecutor's closing statement sealed it. This case isn't about money. It's about betrayal disguised as family care. Mrs. Clark trusted her only son, and that trust was weaponized. Forgery is not love. Deceit is not protection. And arrogance, no matter how polished, cannot rewrite the truth. When the judge dismissed us for deliberation, the jury filed out, faces unreadable. The silence in the room was so thick it felt sacred. I looked at Tyler one last time. "Whatever happens," I said softly, "I hope you find your way back to the man your father raised." He opened his mouth, but no words came. An hour later, the verdict was ready. The four persons stood. "We find the defendants guilty on counts of forgery, fraud, and perjury." The gavel struck once, final as thunder. Madison gasped, covering her mouth. Tyler just sat there, staring at nothing. The judge ordered restitution and sentencing to be scheduled. But I barely heard it. My heart was too full, of grief relief, and the quiet ache of justice finally landing. Outside, the sky had turned gold with evening. Reporters swarmed again, but I walked straight past them. On the courthouse steps, Linda waited, holding a single daisy. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said, voice trembling. "The truth did." We stood there as the news vans pulled away, as the crowd thinned, as the weight of years began to lift. For the first time, I wasn't the one on trial in my own family story. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once cried over a cold casserole, and lit a candle for David. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "I protected what we built." The flame flickered, steady, warm. But deep down, I knew one more chapter remained. Because justice in court doesn't always heal the heart. Tomorrow, I'd face my son alone. No judge. No cameras. Just the two of us, and the ruins we'd made of love. The courthouse verdict should have felt like an ending. But when the crowd dispersed and the news vans rolled away, what remained wasn't triumph. It was the quiet, empty ache of something finished but not yet healed. Justice had been served. The world knew what they'd done. And yet that night, I sat in my kitchen with the window cracked open, listening to the hum of crickets, wondering how a mother was supposed to live with the sound of her own child's name read alongside the word guilty. For a long time, I stared at the phone on the counter. Part of me expected it to ring, that somehow he'd remember I was still his mother, that apologies could still bridge what greed had burned. It didn't ring that night. Or the next. But on the third morning, as sunlight crept across the floorboards, a knock echoed at the door. When I opened it, Tyler stood there, alone. No lawyer. No wife. Just a man who suddenly looked every bit his mother's age. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. "You already know the way." He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd eaten pancakes before school, the same one where I'd once balanced our checkbook while he did his homework. Now, he sat with his hands folded like a child waiting to be scolded. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Start with the truth," I said softly. He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Madison left. She packed up the night after the verdict. Took the dog too. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course she did. "She said I ruined her life," he went on. "That I let you embarrass her. That everything she did was for us." I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the only way to make a liar hear themselves. Finally, he looked up. "Mom." I knew. Not everything, but enough. When she brought me the forms, I didn't question them because it was easier not to. I didn't want to see her anger. I told myself you'd forgive me. He rubbed his temples. "I don't even know why I believed she loved me. She didn't love me. She loved control. And when she realized she couldn't control you, she tried to erase you. My voice came out steady. And you helped her. He winced. I know. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sound of the clock filled the silence, steady, merciless. Finally, I asked, why, Tyler? After everything I gave you. After your father's death, the house, the savings. What was so hard about remembering where it all came from? He swallowed hard. Because I was tired of feeling like I owed you everything. Madison said I'd never be my own man until I broke free of you. She made it sound noble. I leaned back, eyes burning. So you called it freedom. I called it betrayal. He nodded, tears forming. I see that now. For a while, I just watched him. The little boy I'd once carried through fevers and scraped knees was gone, but somewhere in this broken man, I could still glimpse the child who used to run to me after nightmares. He took a deep breath. The court ordered restitution. I'll pay back every cent. But that's not what I came for. I came to tell you. I don't expect forgiveness. I studied his face. Then why are you here? Because if I walk away now, I'll never find it. He reached into his pocket and slid something across the table, a small, wrinkled photo. It was the same one I'd seen on the shelf during the search, me and him at his graduation. The frame cracked. The edges were curled, but the smile between us was still real, untouched by time. I found this in the debris when the officers boxed everything up, he said. It was the only thing that didn't get taken. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at that frozen happiness, two people who had no idea how fragile love could be when pride and greed took root. Finally, I said, you broke my heart, Tyler. Not with the money. Not even with the lies. You broke it when you made me beg for love I already gave you. He nodded slowly. I know. And I don't expect you to fix it. I just wanted to say it. He stood, eyes wet, hands trembling. I'm going to the sentencing hearing next month. I'll plead guilty. Maybe that's where I start over. He hesitated at the door. I'll send you the repayments. But I know money can't buy back what I lost. No, I said quietly. But maybe truth can. He nodded once and left. When the door closed behind him, I sank into the chair and finally let the tears come, quiet, clean years overdue. For weeks afterward, I tried to go back to my routine, tending the garden, attending Sunday service, cooking small meals for one. People treated me differently now. Some with sympathy, some with awe, some with whispered curiosity. That's the woman who took her own family to court. At first, the pity felt unbearable. But slowly, something else replaced it, respect. When I walked into church, people no longer avoided my eyes. They greeted me, offered me a seat. I realized I'd spent years shrinking myself to stay likable, to stay the good mother. Now I was just Carol Clark, still standing, still whole. One afternoon, Linda came over with her usual cheer and a lemon pie. You know, she said, setting it down, the whole town's talking about you. They're saying you gave every woman over 50 the courage to stop apologizing. I smiled faintly. I didn't set out to be an example. I just refused to disappear. That's the same thing, she said, patting my hand. And you did it with grace. I laughed softly. Grace looks different when you're holding evidence folders. We both laughed until we cried. It felt good, like the air finally had room for joy again. A month later, the court-ordered restitution finalized. My accounts were restored. The rental property deed came back under my name. The bank manager called personally to apologize. You've set a new standard for fraud vigilance, Mrs. Clark, he said. I thanked him politely but thought, I wasn't fighting fraud. I was fighting erasure. That night, I visited the cemetery. I brought a small bouquet of lilies and sat beside David's headstone. I won, I told him quietly. But not the way I wanted. The wind stirred the grass, soft and forgiving. I could almost hear his voice, you did what you had to do. A week later, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. It was from Tyler. Mom, the sentencing is done. I accepted the charges. They gave me probation and community service. I'll be working with the local shelter, the one that takes in abandoned dogs. Cooper's fine. Madison signed him over to the shelter when she left the state. I asked if I could keep him, but they said it's best he stays there until things settle. I visit him every day. He remembers me. He's calmer now. I'm learning how to be too. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me again, but when you do, I'll be here. Thank you for saving me from her, even if it broke everything else. Love, Tyler. I folded the letter carefully, tears tracing slow lines down my cheeks. Sometimes justice looks like a gavel. Sometimes it looks like a sun finally telling the truth. The seasons turned. Spring arrived, soft, green, forgiving. One Saturday, while I was pruning roses in the front yard, a familiar bark made me freeze. I turned to see a car parked by the curb. Tyler stepped out, holding Cooper's leash. "Hey Mom," he said. I just stared at them, the man and the dog who'd once stood as symbols of my humiliation, now both looking tentative, uncertain, human. "Can we come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "If Cooper promises to behave." He smiled faintly. "He's learned." Inside, Cooper trotted straight to the living room rug and curled up like he'd been there all along. Tyler stood awkwardly by the doorway until I poured 2 cups of coffee. He took one, hands trembling slightly. "Probation's almost done. I'm working at the shelter full-time now. Turns out I'm good with animals that don't lie." I smiled. "That's a start." We sat in silence for a long time, sipping coffee, letting the past hang between us like a ghost neither of us wanted to chase away just yet. Finally, I said, "You know, Tyler, forgiveness isn't something I give to make you feel better. It's something I do to stop carrying your mistakes with me." He looked up. "So does that mean?" "It means," I interrupted gently, "I'm tired of hating you." His eyes filled. "That's enough." We didn't hug. Not yet. But when he left, he turned back at the door and said, "Mom, Cooper really likes your cooking." I laughed through tears. "Tell him I said he can visit any time." That night, I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the moon reflect on the garden. I thought about how love, when twisted by pride, becomes poison, but when cleansed by truth, it becomes something stronger. Madison had taken my trust and turned it into a weapon. But Tyler, he'd finally begun to turn it back into a bridge. Some bridges take a lifetime to rebuild. But the foundation, the unbreakable part, is always a mother's heart. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote the final line of the story I'd lived. They banned me from their house until I apologized to their dog. But in the end, the only thing I truly apologized for was ever letting them make me feel small. Then, underneath it, I added a message to whoever might one day read these pages. Never confuse kindness with weakness. Never mistake forgiveness for forgetting. And never let anyone, family or not, decide when your dignity is up for discussion. The candle on the table flickered out, leaving only the scent of wax and peace. I closed the journal, exhaled, and whispered into the quiet, "I forgive you, Tyler. And I forgive myself for waiting this long." Outside, the night hummed softly. Cooper barked once in the distance. And somewhere between that sound and the silence that followed, the story that began with humiliation finally found its ending, not in revenge, but in reclamation.